Imagine a time before scientific reasoning could explain much of the mysterious happenings that take place in our world, where it can sometimes be hard to distinguish myth from fact regarding strange and often unnerving occurrences simply only viewed by the naked eye. As humans, one of our most common tools of learning new things and sharing information is through word of mouth. With a long and famous history of storytelling, you'll truly start to understand how Scottish mythology emerged. From the sudden shifts in Scotland's fickle weather to ancient standing stone circles and otherworldly scenery, Scotland's islands are home to some of the planet's most strange and supernatural phenomena. These are but some of the Celtic myths that have been carried down through generations and are sure to live on for visitors to experience today. Many of Scotland's notorious legends are in relevance to the surrounding seas. In fact, it's not often acknowledged, but Scotland is actually part of an archipelago. The main island it shares with England and Wales is just the beginning of a sprawl of over 900 islands, skerries, and stacks that spread across the North Atlantic, reaching almost as far as Norway. This isn't even to mention the abundance of lochs or lakes and rivers spanning its lands. We will begin our journey here, discussing those creatures who call Scottish waters their home. Now immortalized into 30-meter-high statues, the famous Kelpie sculpture in Falkirk towers majestically over drivers along the M9 motorway. These shape-shifting demon horses, however, are a great deal more sinister than their monument gives them credit. A Kelpie, or water Kelpie, inhabits the many lochs of Scottish and Irish folklore. The Kelpie is perhaps better understood as a personification of the flood itself, an animal-like embodiment of the reverence and fear the Celts had for water, rivers, lakes, and seas alike. With all its aisles, and relevance to their frequent storms and restless seas, the water and its spirits would be seen as largely dangerous, evil even. They would appear to their victims as either a lost dark gray or white horse, or a human-like male or female with long flowing hair. However, they could often be identified by their constantly dripping manes. Depending on their current state of change, they would entice people to ride on their backs, or simply lure them away before taking them down to what would almost certainly be a watery grave. Almost every sizable Scottish body of water has a Kelpie story associated with it, but the most widely reported is the Kelpie of Loch Ness. The early 19th century Kelpie that haunted the woods and shores of Loch Ness was tacked up with its own saddle and bridle. A fable attached to the notoriously nasty creature has the Highlander James MacGregor taking it by surprise and cutting off its bridle, the source of its power and life, without which it could die within 24 hours. As the Kelpie had the power of speech, it attempted unsuccessfully to bargain with MacGregor for the return of its bridle. After following MacGregor to his home, the Kelpie asserted that MacGregor would be unable to enter his house while in possession of the bridle because of the presence of the cross above the entrance door. But MacGregor outwitted the creature by tossing the bridle through a window, so the Kelpie accepted its fate and left, cursing and swearing. Throughout countless other tales, many others would not find themselves so lucky, as most anyone else who falls for the Kelpie's cries are whisked away into the watery depths. The similarly named Selkie is another mysterious creature said to be lurking deep within the Celtic seas. The term Selkie refers to seal, as in the animal, in the Orcadian dialect of the Orkney Islands in Scotland. They look exactly like seals, with the exception that they can also transform into humans, very beautiful ones in fact. Often seen lounging about on shorelines, they're also known for their playful, yet notoriously dark nature. To become human, they would have to take off their sealskin as if taking off a costume. Once transformed and completely naked, they would dance, play, or bask on their beaches all hours of the day and night, their shed skins being the only way to transform back into their seal form. If their sealskins are ever lost, they're simply bound forever in human form. Now, because Selkies are considered such beautiful creatures, there are a plethora of stories where human men and women alike were attracted to them, often leading to dangerous results for both parties. Just as with Kelpies, Selkies would hypnotically attract humans, ultimately leading many of them to a watery grave. However, dangers also lie in wait for the Selkies themselves, for humans would often steal their sealskins. They would then force these Selkies to marry them, with a condition of giving back the skin if they have a child together. However, as many of those humans would be so infatuated, they would ultimately end up destroying their skins entirely. This would often lead to many Selkie and human hybrid children, and with it, the Selkie becoming landlocked forever. Surely this list wouldn't be complete without mentioning what is probably the most famous legend of the Scottish waters, if not Scotland in general. The Loch Ness Monster is one that many of us are already familiar with. Nessie, as many locals affectionately refer it as, is most often described as a large, dinosaur-like creature that dwells in the deepest depths of Loch Ness, located in the Scottish Highlands. It is known to have an incredibly long neck and one or more humps protruding from its back. The first recorded sighting of the monster was nearly 1,500 years ago, when a giant beast is said to have leapt out of the lake near Inverness and eaten a local farmer. Since then, the myth of the Loch Ness Monster is magnified. Regardless of the truth, the suggestion of the monster's existence makes Loch Ness one of Scotland's most popular tourist attractions, with thousands visiting its shores each year with the hope of catching a rare glimpse of the notorious monster. There are famous sightings, photographs, and videos associated with the ancient beast, such as this one you'll most likely recognize, taken by Hugh Gray back in 1933 during a simple walk around Loch Ness one day. Naturally, there is immense speculation regarding Nessie's validity, especially by means of modern-day technology via satellite and sonar readings, most of which have picked up nothing across all of Loch Ness. Still, while there's never been any solid evidence to prove the Loch Ness Monster's existence, the sheer number of eyewitness accounts of that ink-black hump and long neck couldn't all be coincidence, could they? Now moving away from Scottish waters and into its heartland, our next wicked encounter takes us to Scotland's capital. The discovery of 17 miniature coffins beneath Arthur's Seat near Edinburgh is easily one of Scotland's most enduring and creepy stories. Ever since they were found hidden inside a small fissure on the northeast slopes of the hill by a group of schoolboys in 1836, they've had the people of the capital scratching their heads. Inside each 95mm coffin was a little wooden figure, expertly carved and shaped, and wearing custom-made clothes which had been stitched specifically for them. Just 8 of the coffins survive to this day and remain on display in the National Museum of Scotland. The rest, it is believed, were destroyed or lost by the very boys who found them centuries ago. But where did they originally come from, and why were they found buried beneath Arthur's Seat? Experts and professors have been looking into this mystery for a long time, so far with very little luck. Theories range from them being utilized as voodoo dolls for dark witchcraft, or weaved as war mementos linked to the Radical War of 1820. Others believe that they were left as a tribute to sailors who were lost at sea, referencing the seafaring superstition that keeping little dolls in coffins was believed to bring good luck. However, the strangest theory of all involves that of a deaf man. The Scotsman, the news outlet, reported in 1906 that a lady living in Edinburgh claimed that her father had been visited by a deaf man at his business premises, who on one occasion drew a picture of 3 small coffins on a piece of paper, dating them 1837, 1838, and 1840. Shortly after the coffins were discovered, he returned to the man's office and glowered at him before storming out. The woman's father would die in 1837, and 2 further relatives would pass in 1838 and 1840. The Scotsman asked if the deaf man could have been the maker of the coffins, driven mad by the loss of his treasures. The link here is obviously more than a little odd, so this theory seems nothing more than a really strange coincidence, right? The Cooshie is a mythical beast found in Scottish, Irish, and Welsh mythology alike. This mythical hound is as big as a large calf and has a shaggy, dark green coat. The green color of its fur is probably indicative of its fairy origins, with green being the typical color associated with the fair folk. Its eyes are large and glowing, and its paws were said to be as large as a man's hands. Not only was the Cooshie terrifying, it was also believed to be a harbinger of death. Unlike its cat counterpart, the Cotshie, who would only snatch the souls of those who were already dead, the Cooshie could also go after the souls of the living. It typically roamed the moors of the Scottish Highlands and made its home among rocky crevices. It was considered a uniquely skilled hunter. The Cooshie would usually hunt silently, but every so often would let out 3 blood-curdling howls. The howls were terrifying and could be heard for miles. Some even claimed that the Cooshie's howls could be heard amongst those far out at sea. When the howls were heard, men, women, and children alike would rush for safety. It was believed that those who had not found themselves in safety by the 3rd howl would die instantly of sheer terror. Nursing women were thought to be particularly vulnerable to the attacks of the Cooshie. It was believed that the hounds would go after them and try to abduct them in order to force them to nurse the children of the fairies. When those hounds' howls were heard, nursing women would thus be immediately locked inside, tucked away from the hound and its reign of terror. On the other hand, there was the aforementioned Cotshie. tales claim that this scraggy cat is that of a witch's transfiguration into a cat. However, the witch may only transform 9 times, as the final transformation left the witch as a permanent feline. Some stories say that they are fairies which like to steal the souls of the dead before the souls can pass on. Thus, there are old traditions to ward the Kotchi from obtaining these souls, such as music or laments that would be played in order to distract the Kotchi through dance. In addition, there were no fires where any bodies lay, as it was said that the mischievous Kotchi was attracted to the warmth. For weary, tired travelers, especially those fearing they may have become lost, there is little that can inspire more hope than the sighting of a light, especially come nighttime. In Scottish folklore, will-o'-the-wisps are variously depicted, either as mischievous spirits, typically fairies, or even the ghosts of the dead, eager to lead travelers off their path and into their untimely demise. The lights typically appear close to bogs, marshes, or swamps, and places where straying off the beaten path can be dangerous, or even deadly. Most of the myths associated with the will-o'-the-wisps, known in Latin as ignis fatuus or foolish fire, show a malevolent, mischievous, or even outright cruel creature. Few myths, however, show the will-o'-the-wisps leading those brave enough to follow the light in the middle of the dark night to a vast treasure and riches beyond comprehension. Some believe that the spirits behind the will-o'-the-wisps were souls who could neither enter heaven nor hell, and were thus forced to wander the earth forever. Others think the devil himself was behind those attacks, instructing spirits to return to Earth with the sole purpose of leading others astray. For yet others, the will-o'-the-wisps had a function similar to that of a banshee, becoming an omen of an upcoming tragedy. Opposing folkloric and superstitious traditions, science suggests that the will-o'-the-wisps and the lights produced by them are the result of the oxidation of methane, disphosphate, and phosphine, a process resulting from the decay of organic matter, which in of itself is rather unsettling. Back in the 1950s, the children of the Gorbals area of Glasgow were being terrorized. Stories had been circulating in the area about missing children. Believing to have been killed, the culprit was said to be a 7-foot-tall vampire with large iron teeth lurking in the southern necropolis. Naturally, any parents or other adults wouldn't believe the kids' complaints, so they decided to take things into their own hands and deal with this monster once and for all, by themselves. In 1954, hundreds of young children from the Gorbals area swarmed into its creepy necropolis graveyard. Adults seeing this take place eventually called the police, but even they couldn't move the children, and it took a local head teacher to finally disperse the young crowd. Local historians believe this mass panic stemmed from the legend of Jenny with the Iron Teeth, a murderous ghost said to haunt Glasgow Green. There was also an American comic book at the time entitled The Vampire with the Iron Teeth. After the story appeared in the local press, it gained worldwide coverage. An unlikely alliance of Christians, communists, and the National Union of Teachers blamed imported American horror comic books for the mass hysteria. The campaign ultimately reached Parliament, resulting in the 1955 Children and Young Persons Harmful Publications Act, which still stands today. A stage play and even a graphic novel have told the story of the Gorbals vampire, and a large mural of the beast guards a local railway arch. The Worm of Linton, while unsurprisingly being from Linton, was not what you would typically think of as a worm. That is, unless your garden is packed with 10-feet-long fanged creatures capable of devouring an entire flock of sheep. As it is described in a variety of ways. Some claim it as sprouting wings, while others stated that it could breathe fire. However, they all agreed that it was a formidable monster that no normal man could face and survive. That was until John Somerville decided to face it. Word had reached Somerville, a man who, while not overly rich or renowned, was of a growing class of brave and honorable man with some local stature. In a bid to both benefiting locals and increasing his rank, he took off to investigate the rumor of a great monster that lurked on Linton Hill, edged at the outskirts of the village of Jedburgh. When he arrived at the village, he witnessed an incredibly strange scene. It was though some strange magic had made every villager simply disappear. The village didn't look ransacked, it merely looked empty, still. Said stillness was incredibly eerie. That was until he heard a clank at the far edge of town. He rode off in search of this sound and arrived at the village smithy. There, Somerville was met with an actual face, as the concerned blacksmith explained the town's ongoing situation regarding that terrifying creature. He explained that no one would be stupid enough to go looking for that humongous beast, but John, both weary and curious, thanked the blacksmith for the information and ultimately tracked the monster to what he believed was its lair. Upon arriving at what he thought was the beast's domain, Somerville slowly dismounted and carefully approached the hole with his torch lit. Then, as though a secret force had struck him to the ground he was walking on, he froze. All was quiet for a moment, when suddenly there was an incredibly vicious snarl as a huge creature lunged out of the cave in the hillside, stopping but a few feet from Somerville. Somerville couldn't quite gauge the length of the beast, as its tail end remained in its lair, but he guessed it must have been at least 10 feet long, humongous like the blacksmith had stated. The creature glared open-mouthed at Somerville, its dark, pooling eyes fixated on his, and its thin, serpent-like tongue hissing from between its long, razor-sharp fangs, at least the length of a man's middle finger. As evening rapidly approached, Somerville, with the light now but a small flicker on the horizon, and his torch quickly becoming the only small source of illumination, thought to retreat as quickly as possible. He gave the creature one last glance over, and caught what he believed to be protrusions from the side of the beast, although he couldn't be sure of it, as he thought it might have just been a trick of the light. What he was sure of, though, was if this creature was indeed some sort of wyvern, it couldn't fly unless guided by a magical force. Somerville edged away from the beast slowly, keeping his eyes completely fixated on this massive creature. But as he took another step back, he stumbled over a small rock jutting from the earth below, and almost instantly the creature pounced. Somerville's years of fighting instincts kicked in, and he swung his torch at the beast. It then recoiled as though bitten and released a piercing shriek. At that, Somerville seized his opportunity for escape back to the nearby village. Upon reaching town, he rode up to the smithy shouting for the man's aid. The blacksmith, clearly about ready for bed, looked less than pleased at seeing the shaken man, though a small grin crossed his face as he folded his arms and said, "Ah, so you've met our creature then. I take it you got a good long look at him for how riled you are." Somerville explained what he did indeed see with his own eyes, and pleaded with the blacksmith to make him a modified lance for slaying the beast. Specifically, he requested a lance with a wheel around a foot from the point, to which the blacksmith said it would be ready in the morning. While it is lost to time exactly how the contraption Somerville asked for worked, some say the point moved on the wheel with burning peat attached, while others say the wheel moved like a Catherine wheel attached to the lance. Whatever the actual design, it involved fire and sharpened iron. The sun began to rise, and the first cockerel crowed, rising Somerville from his monster-ridden dreams in a hay barn. Shaking those thoughts away, he mounted his noble steed and headed off to see the blacksmith, who had indeed forged the lance he had requested perfectly. He paid the blacksmith generously before heading out in hunt of peat and pitch to complete his contraption. He quickly found and liberated both from the deserted village, leaving a couple of small coins in their place. For the rest of the day, he rode back and forth in a local field, brandishing his flaming lance fueled through pitch-doused peat, ensuring a long, burning hot flame. Unfortunately, it also had the effect of being a very smoky affair, and so he sought to ready his horse for its use in battle with the beast. The day drew on, and gradually the horse started to keep its course, stay its pace, and remain calm, and by the day's end, as the sun was setting, he decided he was ready to face the monstrosity, so he set off for Linton Hill and the beast's lair. As he rode out of the village, the blacksmith gave him a wave and whispered under his breath, "God protect this man, he means well," fully expecting to never see Somerville again. Somerville arrived at the lair with a vivid red sky above as the sun began to dip away below the horizon. He began banging on his armor, beckoning the creature to appear from its lair. He then lit his lance, and something about the smoke and the noise drew the creature out. This time it was more pensive though. It slithered around Somerville, looking for a weak spot to pounce. At that, Somerville rode away a small distance as though retreating. Then, as quickly as he left, he turned and rode back at full speed with his lance down. And just like that, he burrowed the fire-spinning lance deep inside the maw of the beast. The beast made the most awful shriek and began yanking the lance from Somerville's hand. But it was too late for the beast. It had been struck a mortal blow, and as it thrust to and fro, convulsing on the hillside, the earth beneath it began to give way, and it plunged through the ground deep down into the cavern below, never to be seen again. Somerville glanced down as he saw the last flickers of his lance disappear into the darkness, along with the creature who had now found a tomb in its former home. Somerville rode back to the village victoriously, and before the next day was out, the villagers had returned from the surrounding towns, and Jedburgh once again thrived. Within the week, word had reached the new king, William the Lion, and Somerville was named the Royal Falconer and the first Baron of Linton for his bravery in defeating the Worm. Scotland claims many traditions around Hogmanay, the last day of the old year, synonymous with the celebration of the new year in the Scottish manner. From crossing hands and singing Auld Lang Syne, to partying until the bells and beyond, one of the most interesting, however, is the notion of the first footing. First footing refers to the first person to cross a particular threshold after midnight on New Year's Day. The first footer must not have already crossed the labeled threshold before midnight, meaning they must either be a brand new visitor to the house or have left that building before the strike of midnight and come back into it after. Gifts are then given as a token of luck for the coming year. In modern times, this usually takes the form of shortbread or whiskey, but traditionally coal was given to represent a warm hearth for not only the remaining and often harsher part of winter, but a happy home year-round. Tradition also asked for a very particular type of first footer. Dark-haired men were preferred, while women and men with fair hair were thought to be unlucky. The unluckiness of fair hair is thought to stem from the Viking invasions of old, while the fearfulness of women may stem back to the notion of the Cailleach, a crone goddess of winter and death who took the form of an old woman who, should she come knocking, would undoubtedly mean peril for those inside. So, next time you think about showing up at a New Year's Eve party empty-handed, consider taking a lump of coal instead.